Hey everybody, you're listening to Sit Down with Stand-Ups. I'm Ari Azizian, and my guest today is one of my favorite comedians. He has two great comedy albums available on iTunes right now. One of them is called Comedy Wondertown, and the other one is How to Get High Without Drugs, and they're both absolutely hilarious. You gotta listen to them. And he has a really cool podcast called Me and Paranormal You, and he talks about paranormal activities with great comedians, and it's really cool and funny and interesting. And you also may have seen him on Marin. He was on an episode, I think, last season, and he's going to be on one this season. And he's just really funny, and you got to see him live if you can. So here's my conversation with the very funny Ryan Singer.
Oh, we're going.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How old was I when I first? I was, I was probably 21 years old when I first performed, and then I took a few years off for ridiculous reasons.
Why was that? Were you
I got like super religious.
Yeah.
I had a Catholic upbringing, and I kind of had like a break from reality for a while, and I had moved here when I was 21-ish, I think, and I think I did maybe a handful of open mics, and then when I was out here, I kind of had a break from reality, and then drove back to Ohio and was just super religious for a couple of years, for like 2.5 years probably, where I thought the end of the world was happening. I thought,
why did that happen?
I mean, I thought it was like the prophecy type shit.
Yeah.
You know. I don't know why it happened. Probably because probably a mixture of my upbringing, being raised Catholic and having a grandmother who was really into all that kind of prophecy stuff.
Right.
And also some mental instability. So it was like a cocktail of, because, you know, when you have like a flare up of that kind of, I mean, some people, I don't know if they'll be offended by that or not, but like I had a flare up of this religious kind of thing. And then you juxtapose that with stand-up comedy, which is, if you wanted to be honest, it would be the most selfish profession.
Right, exactly.
It's like, this is all about me.
Yeah.
Right?
You say you want to make people laugh, but it's...
Yeah, it's a solitary... It's like, you know, at its foundation, there's narcissism there. I mean, yeah, it's that idea that, oh, you know, I'm trying to bring laughter to people. No, but it's all about you. Exactly. It's all about me. So I was like, oh, if there's anybody going to hell, it's this guy, right?
Right.
I want to be famous because of everything I've come up with, you know, as opposed to other people. Like, actors are made famous by casting directors and directors. And,
right.
You know, they count on so many other people for their projects to be successful. But for
Hollywood, I feel like it's kind of shocking too, because it's like not what you would think it is. And
yeah.
It's just like horrible, and everybody's kind of
and the streets are dirty,
dreams.
And you're like, wait, why is there a bunch of trash and urine
exactly
on the
on the stars of like
on the Laurence Olivier star on Hollywood Boulevard? Like, that's Laurence Olivier, and you're telling me somebody just pooped blood on him? Come on, this is Hollywood.
I know.
You know, but yeah, then you're like, oh, this is Hollywood.
Right, this is it. There's French fries all over Charlie Chaplin's stars.
Yeah, it's just like anywhere else in the world. I mean, it can get dirty, and it's, you know, it relies a lot on mystique and you know, but once you get past all that, I think you can really embrace the grit of it. I mean, I was just hiking yesterday, looking down onto downtown and just being like, oh man, I guess I love this city. I actually had that thought, you know.
It grows on you kind of.
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, I've always loved it to a degree, but as far as like embracing it as your own city, where you hail from, I guess that's a little bit different. Especially when, you know, because I love nature and I come from the Midwest, and it's a little bit slower and a little more spread out. I enjoy I enjoy space, the open spaces a lot.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if I would live here the rest of my life if I have a very long life, but I imagine I'll always have some kind of place here.
Yeah. But it's hard knowing like you're wasting like 1% of your life just sitting on the 405. Just like it's a horrible.
Yeah, I avoid the 405 at all costs.
Exactly.
Unless it's 2 a.m.
Right. Yeah. So after these 3 years, do you think stand-up had a part in that? Where you're just like, I need a break from all of this? And
no, I mean, I never stopped loving stand-up.
Right.
Although I will be honest that the idea of people always wanting to hear jokes and stuff once they find out I was a stand-up, that wore on me in some weird way, to the point where I remember I was very, and maybe I still am, it's part of my personality, but I was always about declarations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd always make these great declarations about my life. And I said, I never want to hear another joke again. You know, I was so tired of people telling me jokes, or like, hey, tell me a joke. Oh, you're a stand-up, blah, blah, blah. Where I was to the point where I was like, I never want to hear another joke again.
Yeah.
Let alone tell one. And so, I mean, in some degree, stand-up had a little bit of that. But I think if I was to be really honest, this is kind of occurring to me now as I'm talking, but if I was to really be honest about that feeling at the time, it was just me realizing I'd given up and funneling that, I don't know, self-hatred or disappointment into projecting it outward.
Wow, yeah.
You know, that would probably be the most honest answer I could. I mean, it's been 16 years since then. So, my memory isn't, it's not like it happened yesterday.
Right.
So, time has a way of, putting its filters on things.
But you came back after 3 years.
Sure, yeah. I got into improv.
Oh, cool. Where'd you do
I always
improv
enjoyed improv, but I was in Ohio and I got into a group there somehow. So
that I feel like is the comedy that's not narcissistic, because you're still making people laugh, but you're with a group. So
but you have to listen to other people,
less.
and and listening is really important.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's never as good if you force your preconceived ideas in.
Right.
I do think improv, there's something to be. I always loved improv too. I studied theater in college for a while, and whenever we would do improv exercises, I really excelled and really enjoyed that, just because I had so much fun doing it. And I was waiting tables at this restaurant, and some guy I worked with, he's like, "Man, there's this improv group. They're having auditions. You should go to it." And I was like, no, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't really do the comedy thing, it's not really my style. But I'd started to I'd started to shake loose a little bit from this, like, religious, like, reckoning.
And the declaration of no more jokes.
Yeah. I mean, because at work, I was always funny. I mean, or not always funny, but I was always having fun and trying to make people laugh at work. So I was never one of those people who, whenever you see him at work, it's like, oh, how you doing? And it's like, oh, why'd I ask that question?
Exactly.
Oh, let me tell you what happened to me today. I was always like, I'm at work. I have to be here. I might as well try to enjoy it.
Make the best
so
of it.
Always, maintaining a positive attitude to the best of my ability.
That's
and
so
then,
cool that somebody came up to you and said that you should do this.
Yeah, he was kind of a buddy of mine, and his name was James. And and so I went to the audition, and apparently I didn't really knock it out of the park. But they decided to give me a chance anyway.
Oh, cool.
I may have been the only person who came to audition. Quite frankly, I think I may have been the only one. And then after like a couple weeks of like practicing, going to like practices and stuff, and they're like, "Oh wow, we really didn't know if you had it in you."
Oh wow, yeah.
When you first came by, and I'm sure I was rigid, rusty. Working with others wasn't my strong suit in comedy necessarily, because I'd solely been focused on stand-up in the past. But and then we did a show at a comedy club it was like a competition against other improv groups.
Oh, sweet, yeah.
And I remember being on stage. I'll never forget the moment. The prompt was like, this was like 2000, the end of 2001, 2002. The prompt was something about a rodeo. And I pretended like I was a rodeo clown.
Yeah.
Hiding inside of one of those trash barrels.
Oh yeah.
Right? And and I'd pop out of it and look around. And I was scared or something, right? It was the thing. I was a scared rodeo clown, so I never came out. And I remember popping out at one point. I mean, I could see the whole time anyway.
Right,
it's not like the barrel was there, but yeah, I remember popping out and looking around at the rodeo, but the crowd, and thinking and then looking over and seeing my buddy there, and I'm like, oh, why is he up here?
Oh, yeah.
Like, not like, why is he up here?
Right.
But like, oh, I wish I was up here by myself telling jokes.
Yeah.
As opposed to doing this. I mean, it was fun, but at the same time, like, I even had that thought when I was supposed to be in the moment of like, oh, I should be doing stand-up here.
Right.
This should be me on stage telling jokes.
This. Yeah.
So I came back, and then afterwards, the manager of the club said, "Hey man, you're funny. We have open mic here on every Wednesday. You should come by." And so the next week I went by, and I never stopped after that.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
And I just lived at that club for the next few years.
What kind of club was it? Was a comedy club?
Yeah, it was called Wiley's. Wiley's Comedy Club in downtown Dayton, still there. I perform there every Christmas with Beth Stelling because she's from.
Oh, she's so funny too. Yeah.
From the same city, so we do Christmas time together.
That's awesome.
The last 3 years we've done it.
That's so cool. So how long was it where you were at that club for before you came out here?
Well, I didn't move out here until about 4 years ago. It was 2011 when I moved out here this summer. So I was, essentially just hanging out at that club as an open micer for 3 or 4 years, if not longer. Just there Thursday through Sunday night, or Wednesday through Sunday, essentially, because, they had the open mic on Wednesday, so I was there for that every week. Then I would just hang out for the whole weekend of all the shows every weekend, And
a lot of big comics would come through and.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like like an A-list club necessarily, but a lot of great comics came through. I met a lot of really cool comics through there. Like, unfortunately, not a lot of them, but some of them are no longer alive. But like a guy like Ron Schock was incredible. One of the Texas Outlaws. Yeah. Came up with Kinnison and Hicks and all them, and Carl LeBove. And man, I hung out with him a ton of times.
Wow.
Tim Wilson had come through. He's no longer with us either. But then, I mean, he mostly worked the other club in town. But got to hang out with him and do shows with him and work with him. That dude was brilliant. Another great storyteller and joke writer. And
were these guys all your influences too when you were like growing up?
I mean, sure, a little bit. I mean, certain guys you'd or women. I mean, unfortunately, not a lot of women came through. I mean, the club did bring a few women in. Like the Untamed Shrews. Well, that was they would come to the other club actually in town.
What was the Untamed Shrews?
The Untamed Shrews is this female comedy duo.
Duo?
Yeah.
Cool.
And they're exactly what you'd think by their name, but they're great. They're real nice, nice women. They got an act and they do it well, regardless of if it's right up your alley or not.
Right.
They're really good at it, but. Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a guy named Ken Rogerson, really funny dude. He's an old Boston guy.
Up all these guys, yeah.
And wow, he was just like I was like, oh wow, this guy's really funny. And then this guy named John Caponero. He's a guy out of Chicago originally. I think he's still there in Chicago. But that's when I realized, oh man, there's like levels to these jokes. Like it's like. Boom, he's got a joke, and then boom, takes it up another level to that joke. And then boom, there's a third level to this joke. It's like you're taking an elevator through his joke. Just like, holy shit, a joke doesn't have to be...
Set up punch.
Yeah. Because I always enjoyed that. Like, Stephen Wright's great, and I loved that. And Hedberg was great, and I like that as well. But I was that's never what I gravitated towards. I always gravitated towards more expansive stuff.
I love your stuff too. When I listen to it, I'm just like, oh, that's the same feeling I get. I'm like, wow, it's like so like intricate and so many levels to it.
Oh well, I appreciate you saying that, but it's definitely influenced by especially when Caponera. The first time I saw Caponera live, it was like, oh wow, you can really kind of expand. I mean, it all launched from that.
It is cool exploring a topic.
Sure, yeah, and I really enjoy, and sometimes it's hard to do with your own stuff, but like. It's easy when you're outside of it and you're watching someone else.
Right.
You're like, oh, man, there's all this room to play in this part of your joke.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. When it comes to my own shit, it's like you have to like, I figured out a trick. Before I was recording my last album, it was 2011. Or 2011 or 2012. I can't remember. I think it was 2011. And, I just kept listening to my sets over and over and over and over again because then I figured out if I listened to the same set long enough or enough times, sooner or later I disconnect from it being my own set. Like I've just listened to it. I mean, it's not easy to do. Yeah. It almost feels like you're punishing yourself,
Right.
But then by like that fourth time of listening to that same 50-minute set at a club in a loony bin in Oklahoma City where it's just like, why am I listening to this shit again?
You're able to separate and just watch yourself.
And I'm like, oh, why? Why didn't this asshole say this here?
Yeah.
Like this guy's got so much room to play with this. Oh, that's me.
Yeah, that's so
And then it's like, oh shit. And then the joke becomes better. I mean, that's a commitment. So I try to, it's hard to do. And sometimes I'm better at it than other times. But if I just hike or if I'm driving around LA, stuck on the 405, just listen to my stuff. Luckily there's enough self-love balanced with self-hatred that I can pull it off. But I'm having deja vu in a major way right now, which is an interesting thing. But, which I think is just a sign of synchronicity. But yeah, so I think that definitely was influential. But the thing that probably really launched me from the beginning, as far as that whole idea goes about exploring, was Robin Williams has it's roughly a half-hour comedy special that's hard to find, but you can find it on YouTube, a bad quality of it. It's an HBO thing. I forget the name of the series, but it's not the one most people are thinking of, but it's the one where Tony Danza's in the audience, and
I've seen that. It was recorded at the Roxy, I think.
I think so, yeah. And he climbs the
he
wall.
climbs the stage. Yeah, goes to the balcony.
And he apparently he wasn't
like the Fonz is in the crowd.
Yeah, the Fonz is there. Yeah, he brings. Who the fuck does he bring on stage at the end of it? If you see the extended cut, he's got oh shit, who comes up on stage and does improv with him? I can't believe I can't remember this right now because I just watched
the Mr.
it.
T joke where he puts that's the other special, right? He puts
that's the other one. John Ritter. He brings John Ritter was in the crowd as well, and brings John Ritter on stage, and John Ritter is not real excited about getting dragged up on stage, but he does it.
And it's like the height
they're
of
friends.
Three's Company kind of.
And so they and it's so amazing because there's times where he's gone too far, and he's lost the crowd.
Yeah,
he loses the crowd multiple times, and then he always brings them back, and I'm like, oh my god, there's no rule on how you have to do this, or rules, but specifically there's no rule. I think we forget that in stand-up comedy that I have to do it this way, and it also depends on what's hot right now, or what scene is hot, not what style necessarily, but scene influences style a lot, and I think vice versa. But people are like the nerd thing is so popular and all this kind of stuff. We have to, I have to get into that scene. And it's like, no, you don't. You just do whatever it is that you do to the best of your ability. And then you slot in wherever you go. And hopefully you can slot in everywhere at the, simultaneously. Yeah. Because funny is funny.
I mean, you just bring up that like what's hot right now and stuff. I know a lot of the thing is kind of like nerd, I guess. I don't know, but
yeah, I don't know any other way to say it, I guess, but it's
I can't think of another way.
Yeah, I mean, the Meltdown, I mean, just in general, that space has the best shows.
Right. Totally.
Some of the best shows. I mean, there's other places as well, but
I really appreciate the kind of comedy like you just mentioned, Robin, and yourself. You do characters and voices and all that stuff, and I don't feel like I see that a lot anymore. It's always kind of like a talking head, and it's
talking head
their own character.
Yeah, talking head pays your bills.
Yeah.
I mean, it's talking head is easier to.
There's less risk, I guess.
Yeah, I never really consider risk as a factor when I'm trying to come up with something, but I do understand that when it comes to being able to market yourself, and I mean, if you want to consider all that stuff,
right? And
maybe that's my problem is I don't, but. And when I say my problem, I mean financially, making other people money and making myself money. But, I'm not real concerned. I mean, I make a living doing stand-up as it is right now. It's meager, but it's I mean, what else do I want?
Right.
I didn't get into this business
That's
thinking.
The dream, I feel like.
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to have, a mansion in Malibu.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know what I would do with a mansion in Malibu. Just the idea of having a mansion in Malibu gives me so much anxiety. Oh my God, how much is this mortgage? What the fuck am I doing with my life? I'm paying $6,000 a month to pay for a house.
Why are there 3 garages?
Why are there? Yeah, I have to put things in those garages.
Yeah, you have to buy one.
I don't have that many baseball cards. I have a small box in my room still that I've been staring at for the last 3 days because I'm trying to clear all my stuff out. I'm trying to get rid of all my stuff, and I'm not dying or anything, but. And I'm just like, oh, there's some baseball cards in here. I should just get rid of them. I'm like, no, they'll be 30 years old in like 2 years, some of them. Get rid of them. No, keep them for your kid. You're 38 and you're not even dating a woman. How are you going to have kids? Yeah, I should just get rid of them. Oh, but I like to look at them. When's the last time you looked at them? Oh, shit. And then next thing you know, I've lost my afternoon.
Right.
Just sitting on my floor staring at a box of baseball cards that I didn't even look at.
The same thing with like my Star Wars like action figures. Like, I should take it out of the case. No, it's not worth as much. And then like,
yeah.
What do I do?
My stepdad is a maniac with Star Wars stuff. Like, they have this big room in their basement in Ohio filled with Star Wars stuff. His garage is filled like the shelves.
Oh my gosh!
Like,
I have like 3, and I still can't get rid of them.
Yeah, I don't know what he's gonna do with it all. I mean, like, it's ridiculous how much. I mean, he's a real fanatic.
Does he have like every like army person from Hoth? They could just like
probably. Yeah, I mean, he's got every conceivable piece of Star Wars memorabilia or action figure stuff. But if you met him, you would never guess it.
Yeah,
he's a guy. He's getting ready to retire because he's 70 now, but he's an architect. A real fun-loving guy. Loves his wine. Loves to play golf.
And the secret Star Wars basement.
And then there's just the secret Star Wars basement.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. But yeah, like, I wouldn't know what to do with all that stuff. And, money is, I'm not interested. I'm not that interested in money, which is weird to be in Hollywood and trying to make it and not really caring. But it's also very freeing, I think, in that way.
Yeah, I hear
when you
some people
disconnect from outcome.
Right. There's some people I hear like, oh yeah, I want to like make a bunch and like drive a like Ferrari. I was like, that's your dream? That's it? We can go rent a Ferrari.
And there's funny people out there who are very financially driven.
Right.
And some of them are my friends. And, I mean, they're doing great right now. And you know what? And they're still funny. I don't think necessarily the pinnacle of the art form, at least their version of it, is necessarily their goal.
Mm.
But at the same time, I don't know what their goal is. And, I mean, honestly, I don't really care. But, it's not me. It's not my place to worry about that kind of stuff. It's hard enough to keep myself focused on, trying to stay motivated and not just go to the mountain or the beach every day.
Yeah. Just enjoy life. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned you listen to your like recordings a lot and you go back and you'll add stuff there. Is that how you usually write your jokes, or do you sit down with like a pen and paper?
Well, I try to free write every day, and I depending on how many other things I've got going on or projects I'm working on, I do have a bad habit of overloading my own plate. But with stuff that, like, some people are like, oh, I make my money, then I have a passion project on the side.
Yeah, I
have just nothing but passion projects, and then like a couple weeks later, I'll be like, oh shit, I got to make some money somehow.
Yeah,
So depending on how many projects I've got, as far as like if I'm trying to write a feature screenplay or something, or like develop a TV series or a web series or film something, then my free writing does lack a little bit. But I just try to do that every day if I can, and jokes come from there. And then typically I go through those notebooks and look back for jokes. Go back, and I'm kind of bogged down. I just write in legal pads. But if I had to be honest, let me think. I've probably got, it's almost embarrassing to say, but I've probably got 10 full legal pads I need to go through to look for
to
ideas.
Look for jokes and everything.
And but it's a weird form of time travel, because you can go back and see like, multiple days in a row what you were just obsessed with.
Right, yeah.
And a lot of it, when I first moved here, was like me obsessing about this. My girlfriend that I had just broken up with. We had very recently broken up when I moved. Essentially, when I moved here, we had broken up, and that was like 4 years ago. So that's how far back I am logged on these notebooks, that I'm like reading
all that stuff. Yeah.
All this stuff. I'm like, oh man, you are a real miserable piece of shit. Oh shit.
That must be so hard to like. I know that feeling, and you're going back and you're reading old things and you're listening to old recordings and you're like, oh man, like that's not even me anymore. Like I'm a totally different person.
Yeah,
but it's a part of you. Like you went through it.
And it's the only reason you are who you are today is because of who you were.
Exactly.
And it's important to not judge yourself too harshly,
right.
because you got
like, who is this guy?
Because that piece of shit got you here.
Yeah.
I was listening to one last night because I have this Mindcast. I mean, most people call it a podcast, but I call it a Mindcast, where I interview people with paranormal abilities or experiences, and every 13th one, I do something different and weird. And I put out 2 a week, and on Tuesdays is something I call 30-year bonus, and like it's not a full length interview like they usually are on Fridays, and it's just a half hour typically of me talking about like animal totems or Edgar Cayce or.
What are animal totems?
Animal totems are like, let's say, like spirit animal.
Okay,
almost like what's an animal you relate to,
yeah.
or like
what's your animal that you?
It would have to be a lizard, because I see lizards all the time and I really love lizards.
Oh yeah.
And lizards are something I connect with.
Yeah.
So if there's an animal that you like, that pops in your mind, that you really love the most and that you connect with, that's going to be your animal totem.
Okay.
So it was the 13th 30-year bonus, because I just started doing them not too long ago. And because putting out it sounds like, oh, I'll just put out one a week or whatever. And then it's like, oh, and then this year I'm like, oh, I need to step it up and go to 2 a week.
Yeah.
One interview and one thing where I just kind of talk about topics that come up a lot. And then I'm like, this has really become a lot of work.
Yeah.
So.
Editing and everything.
Yeah. And so this one I put out a bootleg of my stand-up from 3 years ago.
Oh, cool.
There was this place in Atlanta called the Relapse Theater, which was built on like a portal to comedy heaven. It was like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Did you ever watch that series?
How they filmed it at the high schools in Torrance.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool, because I think if I'm not mistaken, the premise of that show was that town was built on a portal to hell or whatever it was, right?
I think so.
And so that's why all that bad shit always was happening there. So I had an ex-girlfriend who I lived with who loved Buffy. And we didn't have cable, but she had the complete series on DVD.
Yeah.
So we watched a lot of Buffy together. And so I was listening to the set before I put it up. And it's like a 40-minute improvised set.
Oh, cool.
And because this place it was called The Secret Show, and they still do it in Atlanta, but it's at a different place now because this place isn't around anymore. But where all the comics in Atlanta that are working the clubs that weekend kind of descend upon this 1 a.m. secret show on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And they perform. And it's not really advertised, but, everybody who's like, hip to what's happening in stand-up comedy in Atlanta knows.
It's a great crowd.
It's a great crowd.
Yeah.
And it's magic. And,
the
people are usually a little fucked up. I mean performers. Because it's, you just did 2 shows headlining at the Improv or 2 shows headlining at the Laughing Skull. Maybe you had a couple drinks. By the time you get on at the 1 a.m. secret show, it's probably 2:15 in the morning.
Oh, gosh.
Because all the other local comics went before you. So it's normally pretty wild and fun to watch and fun to be a part of. And I've done it a few times. And the Relapse Theater was one of them, where Rory Scovel allegedly did like a 45-minute improvised set one night.
Oh, sweet, yeah.
And there's a guy, Gilbert Lowand, who lives in New York City now, but he was one of the guys responsible for kind of like the independent scene in Atlanta becoming something. Him and Jared Harris were kind of, initially the guys that got the Atlanta underground scene going. And so Gilbert was telling me, he's a good friend of mine now, and he was telling me, oh, Rory did this, like he just improvised for 45 minutes. I was like, oh, I'll beat him. I'll beat him by a minute. I was kidding.
Yeah.
Because I was supposed to be coming there like a few months later. So I show up, and I'm doing like a 10 o'clock show at the Relapse Theater, and then I'm supposed to do the 1 a.m. And all these comics are there for like the 10 o'clock. And I'm like, oh, what's up, dudes? And they're like, oh, yeah, excited to see you. I was like, oh, I figured I'd just see you guys at the 1. And they're like, oh, no, we're going to watch both shows because Gilbert told us all about what's happening. And I was like, what's happening?
The 46 minutes.
And Gilbert said, yeah, man, I told everybody that you said you were going to take Scoville down. And I was like, you did what? He's like, yeah, man, I told him how you told me you were going to take Scoville down, man. You're just going to improvise your whole set. And I'm doing a decent impression of Gilbert's voice, but Gilbert's really funny. Gilbert's originally from Iraq, but, grew up in Georgia his whole life.
Southern, yeah.
So he's like, yeah, man.
Sweet charm, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like so I'm like, holy shit, dude. I have to improvise like a headlining set. I've never done that before. So we do the 10 o'clock show. And I remember I'm riffing at the beginning of my set. And I'm like, why are you... In my head, I'm like, stop riffing. You're wasting riffs. Like, save these.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you doing, right? Like, I'm
Throwing
so mad
out
at
gems.
myself. Like, do your material and save your riffs,
Yeah.
you stupid asshole. You got to riff for 40 minutes next show. So anyway, the next set, so it was a fun show. The next show starts, and then, Jared Harris is in town, so he does a set. Nate Craig was in town,
Oh, yeah.
so he did a set, and the show went a little long before me, because I did 42 minutes, and to beat Scoville, I would have had to do 46.
Mm-hmm.
But we had to. It was 3 a.m, so they had to like shut it down.
Yeah.
So I was like getting the light, like shut it down.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a choice. But
And you're like, I'd watch. No, I got 4 more.
yeah, I'd like to think that I could have done 4 more minutes.
Yeah.
But it was just like, and I just recorded it on my iPhone backstage, and
What was that feeling like improvising?
oh, it's insane. But like once you get going,
Is there like a peak, and like do you feel like all
there's
this...
peaks and valleys, and I came up with some material that I still use. That I that became part of my act.
Is that kind of like the Robin thing you mentioned, where like you lose them for a second, but then you can win them back?
Yeah,
Is it
and that
feeling?
set is, and if anybody listening to this wants to hear it, it's I put it online.
Okay, I got.
That was the bonus content I put online today.
Sweet.
So it's like a bootleg. I put up my own bootleg out.
It's on the
but
Mindcast.
but it's like, and it's it's adult language. I mean, when I riff, I'm always filthy initially.
Yeah.
I always have to clean up my act, just because I go dirt. And like that's just the way my brain works and what I think is funny, so I always have to end up cleaning the act, in phases. But yeah, it's.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because I've always wondered, like, because I was a door guy, so I've seen every comic come and do like their same jokes, and I was always like, how can you just do improv as a stand-up? Like, is it possible? And like, is it, or do you kind of have to?
Sure, it is possible. I mean, crowd work essentially is improv, depending on who the comic is.
Yeah.
Although, I typically don't do crowd work because, I don't know, whether it sounds shitty or not. I don't remember being a little kid thinking, someday, I want to grow up and talk to drunk people from a stage.
Yeah.
No, I was like, you know what? Someday I'm going to grow up and I'm going to tell drunk people
Jokes.
my ideas,
Yeah.
and what I came up with and what I've written and conceived. I'm not necessarily interested in what they have to say,
Right.
or I'm not interested in their life.
Right. Especially the 1 a.m. crowd, I feel like it's harder to talk
Sure,
to.
yeah, I don't need to be talking to, talking to a drunk crowd. You might as well, what are you doing? And once I moved into headlining, it became abundantly clear that the feature act, typically the rule of thumb is if you're a feature act, you don't need to be doing crowd work. If you're an MC, you don't need to be doing crowd work at all. But like if you're a feature act at a club, you don't need to be doing any crowd work. I mean, because if the headliner wants to do crowd work, that's for them.
Okay.
So you've talked to everybody in the crowd already. So what if the headliner wanted to do, it's their show, essentially.
So there's kind of like a rule. Like
yeah, it's like a
rule.
It's not even unspoken. Some headliners will pull a feature act to the side and be like, "Hey, don't do crowd work. That's
Oh wow.
don't do that because I'm doing it.
Oh, cool.
Do your jokes. You've got 20, 25 minutes. Why are you wasting it talking to? Don't you have 25 minutes worth of jokes? Why are you featuring if you don't?
Wow.
So, especially if they're drunk, because then they're heckling. Because now they think they're supposed to be talking the whole time.
Yeah.
And now you have to be up there for an hour,
And then they
dealing
call
with
out
these
for the headliner.
these people who think they're part of the show now.
Mhm.
It's like you're ruining the show.
Right.
Especially if it's a small crowd. Oh, you've literally talked to everyone in the audience now.
Exactly. Is this the anniversary couple? Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
The guy from Omaha.
And
Great.
like, and we're comics. We know you're not always able to be in the room the whole time. Maybe you're going over your own jokes or whatever, so you don't even know. So now the crowd's like, "Oh, this guy. Now you look dumb."
Yeah.
Oh, this doesn't he know that they already answered this question? It's like
I already talked to you.
yeah, like no, he wasn't in the room.
Right.
Well, he should have been, right? It's that whole thing. But it is. Some comics just don't know any better because no one's told them. But
So in this,
but like I said, there's no rules.
right.
Goes back to that. But there is like an etiquette, I guess you could say. And besides, I don't know why. I don't know. It's always kind of baffled me. And having crowd work skills is valuable. It's a valuable tool, but I'm just not interested in crowd work. If a comic does nothing but crowd work, I'm not real interested in their act.
Yeah.
But some people do it really well, and so there's exceptions to all rules.
I love like Rickles. Like,
yeah, that's. I mean, what are you gonna do? You're gonna sit here and say Don Rickles isn't the funniest?
Bad crowd work.
Yeah, like come on, you're an asshole if you say that.
But I'm curious because I'm going to listen to it right when I get home. But what was your riffing in this 40-minute set that you did?
Well, on the
Did you
wall,
just think of topics and just go off of them?
Well, I played off of the comic before me a little bit initially, which was Nate Craig. So the first like minute or so is like just me referencing, like doing a character based on his act.
Okay.
You know, kind of expanding into that.
Yeah.
Playing around a little bit in his joke with my own take on it. Mm-hmm. And then there was on the wall of the stage, there was the word relapse painted with, I think it was monkeys, or no, business suit. A man with a business suit, like carrying a briefcase, turning into an ape.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Or vice versa. I
Right.
can't remember. I think it was the businessman turning into an ape.
Okay.
Or ape turning into the... I can't remember which way it went. But it was like a funny take on that, like ape becoming man thing that you see of the phases. Yeah. So it's probably businessman into ape because it's called relapse. And so then I just kind of went off the word relapse and then the letters of that.
Oh, cool.
And then just expanded on that is what happened.
I mean, this is such a silly question, but what's that feeling like, just playing around and kind of?
Oh, it's so
free?
fun. And it should be noted at the time I had poison oak on my entire body for a few weeks at that point. And,
wow.
You know, with no health insurance, and you know, I was a crazy person, so that helped.
That's
probably.
Painful too.
Yeah, and you know, I was doing whatever I could to try to deal with that. So that meant, you know, drinking a little bit, and then also, you know, using drugs probably. I wasn't like smoking weed or anything, but it's in the set. You'll hear I think there's a moment in the set where I have, I think, a painkiller in one pocket and like a Adderall in the other pocket. And I let the audience, and I can't remember which pocket was which. So I let the audience pick which pocket pill I take on stage. And so they picked, and I think I ended up taking both. But which is not the smartest thing to do.
Yeah.
But when you're in the moment, I guess you're willing to die for comedy. No, but it was really fun. Like, it was in the moment. I just remember, like, you don't really have time to think about it because you're just, once you get going, like once that train is going down the tracks, you just stay on.
Right.
Because if you sit and think about what's happening, then you're going to be taken out of it.
And does the audience sort of realize that you're thinking?
The audience doesn't know what's happening.
Okay.
The audience, if I can remember.
I mean, do they know, like, when you go out, do you say, I'm just going to riff?
No.
So
the audience was not in on it.
Okay.
So, and it's important that the audience is not in on it. But the audience begins to understand what's happening a little bit. Well, it's like, it takes away the magic of it.
Okay.
Because they're a little too forgiving under those circumstances. I love doing set list, that show, or prompter.
Oh, yeah, where they just put the word up. And yeah. Robin did one of those, too. There's like a 1-minute video of that. Really great.
I mean, who better?
Yeah.
To do that show. And then, Troy Conrad is great, who came up with those. Him and Provenza. Yeah, if the audience is in on it, they're going to be a little more forgiving. And I don't know, in the moment, it's like, you don't really want to let them know.
Right.
It takes away the challenge.
And you got to work.
Because on set list, the audience is going to be a little more forgiving for you. Because they're like, oh, you're clearly making it up on difficult shit that doesn't make any sense together.
Yeah.
Like, banana conference is your prompt. Now you have to make up a joke on the spot about banana conference or whatever. It's like the audience gets it. But
they're willing to go on this like journey. Make up stuff.
So it's a little more, I guess, earned. Like, as far as I can remember, I don't remember ever addressing the audience and be like, hey, listen, I'm making all of this up. I have to. Because the audience is like, well, why do you have to? Why don't you just do your jokes? Well, there's this story, this backstory, and, then you have to tell the whole backstory. Right. But they start to understand because I think very early on they get what's happening, even though I don't have to tell them because they see I'm going through the words relapse. And they're like, oh, he's doing this whole word. Does he have jokes on letters and the alphabet and this word?
Yeah.
Like, does he already have all of these jokes? Like, so, like, on some level, they're understanding, like, oh, this is something that's happening.
This is now.
And so it's more magical.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to say, or I didn't come out and say, this is what we're going to do. You know?
It's true, yeah.
So it's almost like they get to see a magic trick. I mean, calling it a magic trick almost feels a little conceited.
No,
but,
I mean, I think it's
but
awesome.
it is a thing where it's like they feel like they begin to understand, like, oh, they're in on a magic trick, as opposed to being like, shown, this is a magic trick here.
Right.
Do you see how I did it? Yeah. No. Well, that's magic. As opposed to like, oh, we're all in on a magic trick right now.
Totally.
They kind of figure it out, halfway through the set, I think.
I wanted to ask you too, where do you think, might be a convoluted question too, but where do you think like comedy is sort of heading right now, since there are a lot of comics now compared to like 30 years ago, and like improvising, do you think that fits in somewhere, or where comics did the same material everywhere where they would go?
Yeah, well, no, I think there's something to be said for working material, and working it all around town or on the road, and having tried and true material. It's Picasso didn't. Or the Mona Lisa doesn't look different every time. It's not
true.
There's something to be said for
tested stuff.
Tested stuff, and a great thing, and to have an act that travels. That's the goal. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, to get it on and then to eventually put it on an album. And this whole idea that you have to record an album and then move on from that, but never do it again. Comedians are delusional if they think that if they think they're Louis C.K. The idea, once he started coming out about how he does that, it's like, well, comedians weren't doing that when Carlin was doing it.
Right.
But for some reason, they think since Louis C.K. is doing it, they can do it.
That everybody should.
It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're an idiot. Yeah. I shouldn't say you're an idiot, but the coffee's starting to kick in, so I get a little aggressive. But like, to think that, you should
abandon everything.
I still do jokes off my first album, which I released in 2009. And whether or not someone wants to say that's good or bad or whatever, I don't really care, because guess what? The people I'm doing them to have never heard them.
Yeah.
I'm smart enough to know that most people have no idea who the hell I am. And so if I go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, or if I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, or if I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, these people have not heard these jokes. So why not tell them?
Right. Louis has to change them because it's like...
Exactly. There's a demand for his material. And the idea that these comics don't think that they can't work on this material... I've got jokes on my first and second album that are better now than they were when I recorded them, just because I didn't stop doing them or thinking about them.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes they would just come out unexpectedly, and I would change them on the spot without even realizing it, and then be like, oh my God, it's so much better now. To me, I think. So I think comedy, there are a lot more comedians now, and I don't think that's a bad thing. The people who I think really complain about, there's too many comics and blah, 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 blah. What are they worried about? Are they worried that they're not good enough to, be good? Does it decrease their chances to be good? Not sure. The work is diluted a little bit. You don't get as much work, but ultimately, I think it comes to a fear of they're taking my spot, and then don't let them take your spot. Then just get better. I like it. I mean, whether or not there's 20 comedians or 20,000. You have to have the mindset where I'm good enough to be working. I'm good enough to rise above the din, right? So regardless of how many comedians there are.
I just think it's so cool. There's so many subgenres, and there's so many different like comedians like before. I mean, I don't think that ever existed before. And like
there's definitely. I think that's there's this guy Kevin Kelly who's got a great TED Talk. He's like a scientist guy about evolution, how it always tends towards specialization, and you can see it with fame. People used to just be famous when I was a kid. Oh, they're famous. Whether they were a rock star, or a movie star, or a TV star, they were just famous. They weren't like, oh, he's TV famous, but now you have Twitter famous,
right?
Which I guess is a thing. You have YouTube famous. There's there's adjectives in front of the word famous now, which is specialization. That you have alt comedy, you have club comedy. It's like this specialization of the thing because it's been around longer. And stand-up comedy does get more difficult every day because every day more jokes have been told about more things by more people.
Mm-hmm.
So to have a unique take on a subject becomes more difficult the later. That's why I'm so impressed by like really great music. Now, granted, I don't have a knowledge of all the music that came before to know if it's very similar or ripping off somebody.
Yeah.
So
I love that joke you do where like there's probably a guy, 14 other guys doing the same exact
Oh
joke.
yeah, about being special
Welcome
and
back,
unique.
Cotter.
Yeah. No matter how unique or special you think you are, there's somebody just exactly like you.
Doing it
living the exact same life.
No, I mean, I didn't mean to say like where do you think comedy's going? That was such a weird question, but like because it's so different now and like there's just so many different like genres and things to do. And I mean, I'm just fascinated with improv and being able to utilize that in a stand-up.
Yeah, I don't think stand-up ever goes into full improv mode, because then it wouldn't be stand-up anymore necessarily. Right. But I do think that, I remember when I was a kid, my dad told me that traffic is like a rubber band. Sometimes it stretches and sometimes it's tighter. Mm-hmm. I think comedy is like that too. I don't think it's ever going to bust, but it's definitely stretched out right now to where there's more can fit inside of it. And I think it will tighten again. That's just natural. It's definitely going to tighten again. And I think some of the improv stylings, like shows like Set List and all that kind of stuff, which are really fun to do and are fun to watch. Although those are so good, I don't see them ever going away. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of other shows and specializations of it that I think will go away. Like I run a monthly show called Underbelly where stand-ups do everything but stand-up. So it's like all these stand-up comics have to go outside of their comfort zone to do. That's an example of specialization.
What are some of the things that people do?
A lot of character pieces and music. Sometimes people read old journals, or it can be anything. Someone's made a sandwich to music before.
Where is this at? Where can I go see it?
Echoes Under Sunset.
Okay,
on the first Friday of every month.
Awesome.
Is when it happens. And so I mean, will that show stick around forever? No, probably not. Just because it's a pretty niche show, and I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to be able to run it forever. Sooner or later, I'll probably have, if I'm lucky, I'll have a kid or two, and my Friday night will be diapers and not, having a mountain.
On stage. That's what comedians never.
Maybe I will. Maybe I will. So never say never. But yeah. So I think there will definitely. I don't see less people doing trying stand-up comedy anytime soon, and I'm not mad at them. Like, because I remember when I started comedy, there was like, there's so many comics nowadays, the old guys would say.
Yeah.
It's like, that was 2002, And it's like, no, that was pre-Twitter and all that shit.
Right.
And there were too many, there's so many damn comics now. It's like, and so now you have guys going, there's so many damn comics now. The difference is
my generation was better than your generation.
Sure.
Kind of talk, yeah.
And it's always, too, it's just who's calling themselves comics.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody in the world can call themselves a comic, but not everybody's out there calling themselves a stand-up comic.
Yeah.
So relax. They're not, they're not taking anything from you.
Yeah,
they're not taking anything from you. Just relax. And if you think they're taking your spot, just work harder and get it back. Someone's not taking tickets from you. You're not selling tickets anyway. Nobody's selling tickets anymore. Unless you're one of 5 people, you're not selling a fucking ticket. It's all free tickets.
Right.
So yeah, I think I think podcasts really help stand up. I think podcasts are probably the most responsible for the stand-up comedy boom that's happened.
Yeah, I mean, I have one. If I have one, then it's over. Then
but at the same time, there's probably a handful of people who really enjoy your podcast.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, I don't know how many people listen to it, but I mean, there's probably, I'm sure you wouldn't keep doing it if you knew 0 people listen to it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's just one.
Although that's what you need in stand-up comedy is like, you just need to keep going, even though 0 people are. I was doing open mics for 5 years before I even got an MC week.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, so that's a long time to like.
That's what I wanted to ask you too. It's like you've spent a long time doing open mics, back where you're from, and then like this process of getting to where you are, do you think performing in different cities, because you always hear like people like, oh, you should stay in your city first, like in San Francisco or somewhere, and then come to LA. Do you think that helps a lot, or?
I think everybody's got their different. I think it depends what you want.
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to be a touring stand-up comedian. I wanted to be a stand-up who got to do television and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
And maybe did some movies but I wanted to be a stand-up comedian who also did those things. Like, so when people said, "Oh, Ryan Singer, oh, the stand-up?"
Yeah.
Not the, "Oh, Ryan Singer, oh, the guy from that sitcom?"
The actor, yeah.
Or the actor? "Oh, no, did you know he did stand-up?" "No, I didn't know that."
Yeah.
You know, I want to be like, "Oh, the guy who does stand-up who also acts." So for me, the Midwest was perfect because I was born there too. So I already had kind of a support system, and you could drive to 30 clubs within 8 hours in your car, which meant you could get stage time in front of regular people.
What is Dayton like? The audience like? Is it like? Can you try out a lot of like San Francisco? You can try out a lot of like out there kind of stuff. Is it kind of
well,
like
Dayton?
that,
You can try out their stuff too.
Yeah.
I mean, whether or not you, I mean,
I guess you could do that anywhere. But I'm just
when I was coming up, I told a lot of jokes to silence. Because I mean, like when you look out on stage and you don't see that much because of the lights, but it's just, and this is a generalization and it's an exaggeration, I should say, but like a sea of NASCAR hats. Okay,
Yeah.
Imagine a sea of NASCAR hats.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm telling jokes to silence, essentially.
Oh wow! Yeah.
I'm getting silence responses, but then eventually you learn, okay,
What makes them?
these are people. I'm a person. Just because they like different things doesn't mean we don't have shared experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So how am I going to relate to these people? Because comedy's all about relating. You don't think something's funny if you can't relate to it.
Right.
You have to understand it, or it's just gibberish. So that was the challenge for me, was how do I get these people that I don't identify with at all? How do I make them understand that we're different yet we have the same experience of life? And so it was a really great challenge. And different cities have different people.
Right.
But essentially, they're all the same. I mean, the idea, I think we can get into our heads too much about, like, all these people are different. Because then after a show, somebody who you would never expect will walk up to you and be like, "Oh, my God, that thing you did was so funny." Or, "Oh, I really got that thing." It's like, "Oh, look at you. I never would have." Like, if you walked into my show beforehand and I was, like, in a judge mood, I'd be like, "This person's not going to get it. Get him out of here." And it's like, oh, then you're not giving people a chance.
What do you think it is when you go on the road and stuff? What is the material that most people like relate to? I know it's out, but like personal things, like stories, and
I think so. Like, there's tricks and ways to make people get what you do. There's a weird LA specifically. When I first moved here, there was this alt comedy world idea, and then there was also like, oh, road dogs, right? And the same way that there's comics that are doing quote unquote alt stuff that almost no one gets, there are quote unquote road dogs doing stuff that everyone gets, right?
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that there's value in either one of those as far as like each end of the spectrum goes. You could argue one's trying to attempt art and the other's trying to sell T-shirts. Yeah. But
it's too extreme on both.
Yeah, but it's like, why? Who cares? Like, why? The person who's selling 1,000 T-shirts on the road, with like joke book jokes and shit like that, like, what are they taking your audience from you? Like, you're on stage, painting your face, reading from your 4th grade journal, and you think you have the same audience? Like, you're not going for those people who are going to buy those T-shirts. Why do you care? Let them have them.
Yeah. I just admire comics just doing it. Like, just doing stand-up, I think, is the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, and I think, but there's like a tinge to, like, there's a negative tinge to, like, oh, there's a road dog. And to me,
Why
I don't.
Is that? Why is
I don't
that
know. I don't know, because to me, a road dog, someone who makes a living doing stand-up comedy, that sounds like a great idea.
For me, the dream is going on the road. I think that's the coolest part.
And I think that's the thing. Anyone who identifies as a stand-up comic The dream is to go on the road.
Yeah.
Now, the people who don't identify as a stand-up comic, first and foremost, they're not worried about doing the road. They want to write for TV, or they want to do something else, or host a show, or whatever. Who cares? Right. But they're not identifying as a stand-up comic. Now, stand-up comics are very inclusive to those who identify as stand-ups. But if you don't identify as a stand-up, there is a little bit too much of a cliquey nature to the world, I think. Because they're like, oh, you're not a stand-up. Get out of here. Like, what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you doing?
Is that a guitar?
Are you a stand-up or not? Like, I was reading this book. It's so funny, the guitar comic thing. Because everybody says, oh, man, I hate guitar comics. But I love Henry Phillips. And, like, so it goes to show that even the most staunch people are willing to, like, identify and acknowledge something that's really great.
Right.
And, like, to say that there's no place for that in stand-up comic is ridiculous. And stand-up comedy is ridiculous.
I think that's just jealousy.
It is jealousy.
Oh, I can't play guitar. So
yeah, and I'm not nearly as funny as this guy, right, or this lady or whatever, but it's
anything that's funny, I think, is awesome. Like,
yeah. And there's no rules. I mean, and like, but like the cliquey nature of things, it's when people identify too much with these like set of rules they believe exist.
Right.
And
like
that
all
are
comedy only or stand-up comedy.
Yeah. Because it's funny because like doing the road, people are like, you're just too weird for this room. And then like here in town, it'd be like, oh, you got some road to you, right?
Right.
So it's like, oh, this reminds me, my whole life I've been living this dichotomy.
Where you never
like where I was a theater major, also in a fraternity.
Yeah.
So like my fraternity brothers were like, oh, you're a theater guy.
Yeah.
And the theater people were like, oh, you're a frat boy. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm very comfortable,
you're
living
just right
that.
in the middle,
Yeah, I'm right in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think when stand-up comics get really cliquey and like, oh, we're comics, you're not a comic, get the fuck out of here. It's like, okay, we need to relax. You need to settle down. None of this is important at all. None of this has any true meaning.
We're not building bridges.
Everything is meaningless. You're ascribing so much value to something that isn't necessary. We could all be dead tomorrow and the world continues. And you're getting so fired up about it. And there's nothing wrong with loving what you do and becoming passionate about, what you strive to achieve. Yeah. But at the same time, when you become that delusional to think that it's the most important thing in the world, like when stand-up comics or actors, become so full of themselves and think they're better than people, that to me is it's funny.
It's totally funny,
but it's a tragedy too. But it's like, oh, you really think you're better than me because of something, or you think you're better than people because that's really adorable. That's really adorable. But if there's a hell, you'll be there, but there's not. So okay,
we're just gonna have to live with your.
We're just gonna have to live with you. Yeah, there's no reason to. I mean, I'll tell you though, like I don't get drunk a lot, but every once in a while on the road I'll get drunk, and if there's a bunch of young comics around, and it's not like I've been doing it forever. I've only been doing it like 13 years. I won't shut the fuck up about stand-up comedy. Like about how important it is. What we're doing here is art, boys and girls. Let's be focused. Dedicate your life.
It's not a guitar. Get that out of here.
Get that out of here. So are those flashcards? Get them. Are you taking a notebook on stage? I'll kill you. Flounder. Don't take your notes. Flounder. Embrace that feeling of being lost. It's like, okay, settle down. I wake up the next day and I don't have a voice. I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to do 2 shows tonight. What happened last night? I'm like, oh, I had like 2 shots of whiskey and 3 beers. I must have talked all night about how stand-up is the most important thing in the world.
Well, thank you so much, sir. It was such a pleasure.
Is that an hour already?
I believe so. Yep.
Well, golly. Okay. Well, that was fun talk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing me candy.
No problem. And I'll post this next Monday, so if you wanted to plug any shows next
Cool,
week.
yeah. And we were talking about that bootleg. It's on meandparanormalyou.com.
Okay, sweet.
Or on SoundCloud also, on iTunes and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
So if people are interested in it.
Thank you so much.
I've interviewed a lot of comedians on there who have had paranormal experiences.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
As well. So
I'd love to hear it.
Pretty cool.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Ari.
Thank you.